Mary Taggart's getting ready, and she's like the queen of color, so get excited because you're going to be inspired, whether you're an oil painter, a watercolor painter, an acrylic painter, or photographer. What? Or pastel, that's right. If you have any people, we have a demo schedule over with where Hetty and Joyce are. If you have anyone who is that you would like to have a demo, or if you think you're ready to demo yourself, that's something that I'm very interested in. Charlie Gargis is our program advisor, and he just came back from Greece, and he's not here tonight, but he does say hello to everybody. So we worked over the summer to get a good schedule going for you. Mary is someone that has actually taught me, so I'm very excited because she had a real influence on a lot of people in the area. She does a lot of work with children. Okay, so tonight, Mary, I just want to welcome everybody here. Mary Taggart is a great artist. She's and a teacher, a nurturer, just one of the most colorful people I know. She is, you can tell her paintings from miles away because they're just bright, beautiful colors. She captures light, and she has been very active up until probably yesterday. She's in Boston all the time.
A BFA.
A BFA at Mass Art. But she's very active in referencing a lot of the latest design and art techniques. She will find such, when she is instructing down at her studio, which is right down the street here, on the other side of Lynnfield, just down the street into Wakefield. Taggart Studio, which is over by the Frame Shack, and Print Graphics. When she's instructing, she does a lot of things right off her iPad, and it's a very unique way of learning because you can say, "Oh, I really like Monet," and she'll pop it up, and you can have this this interesting dynamic going while you're painting. But I've learned a lot from her, and I'm very pleased to have her tonight. So. Mary also does craft and design kinds of things, to etching on glass or wreath making, all kinds of fun things to do, and she's right down the street, so I do urge you to check out her website and check her out on Facebook, Mary Taggart, Taggart.
So I understand I'm colorful, so I wore jeans and a white shirt. I did bring a couple of my recent paintings. I'm working on a dress series. It's something that started last January, so I thought before I started I would show you a couple of the dresses from the series. And there's nowhere really to hang them, but it's all about the structure of the fabric under the, actually, the fabric is soft, but there's a structure. And so I have this antique mannequin in my studio that I've had forever, and I started, some of the dresses are on the mannequin, some aren't. But these two happen to have used the mannequin, and this is actually the tool from under the dress. And so my whole perspective has been, how can I show softness, how can I show transparency, how can I really suggest there was once a body in these pieces of clothing, and believe me, they are old, out of style dresses that I've used. So if anyone has anything from like the 80s, the 70s, the 50s, and it's collecting mold and mildew, I will take it off your hands. Because it's really hard to find it. I can find prom dresses from like, last year, and they don't give me the structure and body that I need. So at any rate, you can see here how I really try to work with value. Lift them up. Okay. I really work with value. Value is the most important thing in a painting. More than color, more than line, value. Value is what determines how you represent the three-dimensional world on a two-dimensional surface. Value is what does it. And every teacher I've ever had has talked about value, 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 value. I studied with, recently, in the last 5 years, I've studied with two teachers primarily. One is Catherine Keogh, and she is at the Department of Painting at Mass Art. And these books, if anyone is interested, I did bring some catalogs from shows. You can see here how she represents color. It's extremely simplified yet very complex color. And her method of teaching was a little different than anything I had encountered of the simplification. But I found through the simplification process, you would start to create better, stronger color. You would be more persistent in searching for the right value, and this would help you as you worked along in your painting. Her teacher, and subsequently my teacher, also used to be the chairman of the department at Mass Art. His name was George Nick. Does anyone know George Nick? He's a nationally known artist. He's in museums worldwide. He lives in Concord. He is not a warm fuzzy. He will go, "What is that?" when he looks at your painting. And you have to be strong to say, "Okay, that's not a good effort today." You know, and I was on the receiving end of that, but I also was on the receiving end of, nice job. And he was Catherine's teacher. And if you're familiar with the lineage of painters in the United States, before him, he studied with, oh gosh, it just went out of my head. But anyways, the teacher before him was Hawthorne. Are any of you familiar with Charles Hawthorne? So it was Hawthorne, then, it'll come to me later, then Nick, and then, at any rate, so this lineage to me was really important. And these are all people who paint realistic paintings, which I'm sure you are aware it's not always in fashion. But I think it's a worthy endeavor, because isn't that the greatest challenge we face as painters, to try to represent the real world in our own voice, really. And so that's why I brought these. If you're interested to look at their work at the break. The first thing when I begin to paint, primarily I paint in oils, but when I teach I often use acrylic, sometimes watercolor, sometimes water-based oils. People that have health issues oftentimes want to use the water-based oils rather than straight oils because they can be toxic, obviously. But the great thing about acrylics is they dry so quickly, you can fix your mistake. The same, if any of you are ever interested to use wash, same thing. You get that opacity, but then you can also correct. So tonight I'm going to do a setup, and when I begin painting, I do simple setups in my studio as well as these big things. And I have to really look carefully at what I'm doing. So I look at this, and I like the colors, but I see one thing wrong right away. Can anybody tell me what's wrong for this setup, compositionally? Well, I don't mind that it's all on one side, but anybody see this and this? It's like rabbit ears, right? So not good. So we have to move this, and maybe I can put the two of them over there. Don't really like that. Let me see if I can put this way. I like that much better, okay? And I like and obviously this and this are what? Complementary colors. So right here, I've already got something good going on. The next thing, I'm going to take these right out of here. The next thing that I use is my viewfinder. Do any of you use a viewfinder? This viewfinder is tried and true. You can buy them for like $5. And they're marked for what size your canvas is. And then I decide, how am I going to frame this in? Do I want the entire thing? Do I want part of it? And I can tell you right now, I don't want the entire thing. I'm going to crop it. So I'm going to bring this a little closer. Unless you want me to paint you in the thing too, right? So I'm looking at this and I'm seeing what I think I want to capture. So my first thing that I would do is to do a thumbnail. Do you people all do thumbnails when you're painting? You know what a thumbnail is? No. Thumbnail is when you look at your subject and you draw a smaller version. So I'm going to have a rectangle, because that's what I brought. And looking at this, I'm thinking, all right, when I look through my viewfinder, I'm holding, and I'm going to have like I have a 8.5 by 11. So that lines up here. When I look through this, I think, okay, I see it. So right here is the giant bunch of yellow. Up here is the lily. Here is a purple. Here is a purple. Down here are the two button, whatever you call them, I'm not a florist. And then I can see these leaves. So I say, okay, this is my general layout, okay? So I'm not going to waste a lot of time tonight. Maybe it's not the best composition, but I want to get busy so that you can see something happening here. So I then choose a surface. You may all, use canvases, right? I use canvases sometimes, but otherwise I use these birch boards, and Artisan Craftsman sells them. They look like this, okay? You can get them with a cradle on the back, so it looks like they're already mounted. But they're wonderful if you just gesso them, and I tint my gesso so I don't have to do anything else. So these are like $1 or $2. I love them, because the other thing is you can stack them up. You know how much room all these take up after a while if you're painting all the time? So the other thing that I use is one other surface that I use. Yes. And this is really a fun thing to do, especially if you're traveling. Watercolor paper that's gessoed. Same thing. Heavyweight, yeah. This is like 100-pound cold press I believe. And actually, this paper had two sides. It had a rough and a smooth. I bought it for $10 for 5 giant sheets. So think of how many, especially if you're doing a lot of studies and you don't want to get really caught up in all these keepers. I tell my students not everything is a keeper. Let's not get too invested in any one thing. It's the repetition that gives us greater skill and greater mastery. And today I told my students, there's a story of a pottery class that the teacher decided to tell the students, they were in college, okay, we're going to divide you in 2 groups. One half of the room has a whole semester to make one perfect pot. The other half, they were told, I don't care how you do them, you're going to make 50 pots. So at the end of the semester, when all the students brought their work in, whose work do you think was more successful? 50 pots. Why? They did it so many times, and they didn't care so much about the actual result. They had some beautiful work, whereas the ones that were always trying for that one gorgeous pot failed because they lost that repetition. You know, it takes 10,000 hours to get proficient at anything. You've probably heard that before. So I felt like, oh, good, I've been painting a little bit. That means I'm, 1/10 of the way there. So, anyways, so the next thing is to lay out your palette. I'm using a simple palette tonight. I don't believe in huge boxes of paints. I think all that does is muddy your colors. Choose a palette that's right for you. Generally, you have a warm and a cool of each color. Yellow, red, blue. That's it. And white. Then you can start adding in, if you're doing figure painting, certainly there are other colors that you need. And my teacher has taught us, we don't get any earth tones on our palette. Because she believes that, and I have come to see it, you can make beautiful earth tones yourself. And it's much better to create a gorgeous earth tone than squirt one out of the tube. So that's why you'll see I'm just using this really limited palette tonight. So I will put it out. Those of you that paint, the other thing I brought was cotton duck. So if you ever stretch your own canvases and then you gesso it, and that's a real economical way. If you're like that one, I stretched myself, the big one over there. So it's a real economical way to get some nice big canvases that are sturdy. That's the other thing. So another tool that I use is this, and you may have done this yourself. You're like, oh, how's that angle of that flower? I see it's like this, okay? And I'll show you a little bit about that. And I always use a palette knife. You never mix with a brush because why? Muddy color. I am a fanatic about color and clean, beautiful color. I'd rather have a few beautiful marks, beautiful color, than a whole finished painting with color. I don't want it. But one thing about using a palette knife, I don't know if you all do, they get really, really sharp as you use them, and you can cut your hand and ask me how I found that out. I had no idea that happened, but it's like a knife, you keep going back and forth, and the edges get sharp. So I tend to tape my boards just to lift it up a little higher, okay? The other thing I do is I do wear gloves whenever I paint. I just rather pull the gloves off than try to get it out of my hands. And if you're using oil paints, it's really important to use gloves because you don't want any of those cadmium getting on your skin. And also, if you are using oil paints, you can buy an odorless medium, thinner, but just because they're odorless doesn't mean they aren't toxic. So always have good ventilation. I thought it was all the same. If they said they were odorless, great. Not so much. Okay. Always the white goes in a different area so that it doesn't get contaminated by the other colors. You might have noticed I did this because these will be my paints, and then when I'm whoops, I'll hold it this way. These are my paints, and then when I need a new palette, I can take off this bottom section because then I can keep my paints up here. I always mix my paints from yellow. I always lay out my paints in the same order. If you're painting, laying them out in the same order is just good for, first of all, housekeeping of the palette, but also so that you always know where everything is and there's no wasting time. Kind of, you almost can do it automatically, reaching for your color. So this is a lemon yellow. It's a cool yellow. This is a warmer yellow. Actually, this is the cooler yellow. A little cooler. It's more, it's almost got a little greenish hue to it. By the way, what's the difference between a hue and a color when you're buying your paints? Does anyone know? It's the amount of color. So if you see something and it says hue, don't buy it. It's not, it's very weak. You need to buy the real true color. So I have a deeper red. And I'm actually going to put out this permanent rose just because it's good for the purples. It's a little pink. There's a lemon yellow and a cadmium yellow medium. And I did bring a couple of greens just to speed up the process a little bit. That's a little kind of bright for my taste, but I'll probably use the sap green.
What about the red?
Permanent rose, primary red, and cad red medium. I like alizarin crimson too, but I didn't have it in the acrylic today. All right, and here's my French ultramarine blue. To sketch my flowers using paint. I usually do my initial sketch with a brush. I don't draw anymore on the canvas. I just go right to drawing this way. So I'll mix a brownish kind of color. So obviously I don't have any brown on my palette, so I do two complements. And in this case, I just use the green and the red. Water it down. And I'm just going to block in where I think everything belongs. So it's almost like that. And squinting. You guys all know about squinting, right? So here are there's like 4 yellow flowers right here. 5 actually in the back. Here's the orange lily. I'm trying to keep on target what goes where. And the green that comes down the top of the jar is here. Some leaves here. Let's see. Purple ones, little guys over here. And this goes way off the page. And up here is the other one in the back. Okay, so now I have some space. So the next thing that I'll do is using this water. I'll kind of block in some of my areas that I know are a darker value. I'm going to just add a little yellow to this, make it a little more golden. And the thing about acrylic is it dries so quickly. So over under here, this is the stem, this comes here. More leaf shape. This one is up here. And of course I'm doing this really quickly. If I was working in my studio, I would be checking a lot of these angles, checking the relationships to the shapes to each other, okay? So, okay. But I think you can start to see what's happening, okay? This is the purple. Can you start to see these shapes? That's the little bud that's up the top there. And I'm not going to really do too much in behind these flowers, but the next thing that I'll do is mix up a background color. Now for today, I usually would have something behind. So today I'm just going to make up a different kind of grayish color just to differentiate, because we want to make sure that our focus are these beautiful colors. Your darkest colors combine to make a gray, to make a dark black. So you can see I'm getting a black here with the green, cadmium red medium, the darker green, which is the sap, and the ultramarine blue. I can check this gray by taking a little bit of it and bringing my white over and say, all right, is this the kind of gray I want? Is it too green? Is it? But I'm kind of satisfied with that. I think this is a good gray. So now I'll mix a bigger batch, because what happens when we don't mix a big enough batch? Then we're looking, saying, oh, I have to match that color again. And it's okay if you want a different color, but it's not okay if you're trying to have some continuity. Now, I'm doing this because I want to see as far as a value change. So I want to have this be a darker value than some of my flowers. So the wonderful thing about this is that when you want to go back in and go around into you can go back into your flowers and break those edges again, because this is dry. Unlike oil, it'd be wet, and you really wouldn't have that opportunity. So let's see. Lock in. The other thing is thicker paint for what's in the foreground, thinner paint for what's in the background. So you can see I'm looking at the negative space at this point, trying to block in where that negative space is around these flowers. And this one is also breaking the edge. So I can go back in on top of some of these details, with some of these details after, when I feel like I have more information. So now I can start to work in this interior. And I can always come back here and do this again later, even though it might not be the same color. But I know how I made it, so I can come back in later. Now, if you're working in a studio and you want to work with flowers, it's a good idea to get artificial flowers so that you can come back to it again and again. Tonight is more or less a study. It's quick, it's brief, and you can't come back to it once you're done because the flowers won't keep. But that doesn't mean that you can't paint flowers if you just invest in some good quality flowers. Keep them there and come again and again. So now my next thing, I'm going to work from dark to light. So my next thing now I'm going to do these greens. There's some really lovely greens. There's like a limey kind of cool, warm green up here. There's some cool, deeper greens down here. And the bottle itself is like an aqua green. And then over here, again, it's a really kind of true green. So now I'll move on to mixing my greens. And with that, I'm not going to get carried away into too many details. It's so tempting to want to put in every stem, every little vein. I don't paint like that. Well, I painted a little more like that on those. But when I'm doing this simplification process, how can I best represent these wonderful yellow flowers without painting every petal? Part of that is squinting, right? Like this. What do we see? So I'm squinting right now. Boy, it is dark, dark, dark right over here. So to get a dark green, we add some red. I know some painters that say they never put any green on the on their painting unless there's some red in it, to just tone it down, knock it down a little bit. I don't know if I totally buy that, but this green is getting darker. And I can hold up my palette knife and say, okay, does that work? When I squint, is that the right value? And I can say, I think it just about is. Maybe I'll put a little more of this in, get it a little deeper. Remember, I can always put some brighter tones on top of it. And you notice I'm using a big brush. I use primarily flats and brights. The brights are a little shorter, the flats are a little longer. These are mostly acrylic. Okay, I do have some sable brushes. This is a sable brush. They tend to wear out pretty fast, especially when you're painting on a hard surface like this. I sometimes use a filbert, but never rounds, never. Okay, I'm always a painter that paints this flat type of stroke with plenty of paint on the brush. So now that I'm switching to this area, I may be going to go with a little smaller brush, but the difference that's going to happen now is now I want more paint. Now I really want to say, and I'm thinking, okay, is this color I want here? I think it is. Because the only way that I'm going to have any kind of interest is to have a little bit of contrast here. But now I think that's enough of that. I really want to go a little brighter for some of this other green. So it's tempting to say, oh, look, I've got that green. Let's just lighten it up. But what's better is to make a new color, not just use the one that's there. And it's so tempting. It's so tempting. When we make shadows, we're like, oh, let's just lighten it up. We'll take the color and just lighten it up or darken it up. No. And you notice there's no black on my palette either. Because why? We can make beautiful blacks. There's so many different ways to make black. So I'm going to start making a little bit brighter green through my green. And you notice I take a pretty good amount of paint when I'm making a color. So I just hit that other green, the permanent green middle. It's bringing that up a little bit. So when I hold this up, it actually looks more like these, but that's, when I put this up here, doesn't it look a little bit much, right? So I'm also thinking about not only what I'm doing, but I mean what I'm seeing, but also what's right up here. I'm gonna hit that a little bit, just to cut it with the red. So it's not quite so electric. Let me see how this is. Better. Okay, better. I feel better about that. And remember, these are just laying in colors that I think belong in some of these areas. You're also quiet. I just have to tell you, this is a really hard thing to do. I'm admitting it. To talk and paint at the same time. Usually I'm fully concentrated and I don't speak, I don't answer the phone. And when someone calls me and I have to answer the phone, I'm always irritated because it breaks my concentration. But when it's one of my children and they live far away, I'm like, okay, well, I'll talk to you. All right. So let's see. So we start to get some definition in this greenery down here. These leaves are a totally different color, I think. So again, I'm going to move that color, make a new color. Take a little more yellow for this one. But even though I put some yellow in this, it's still pretty electric. So again, let's get a little bit of red, just bring it down. Do you notice which color has hardly not been touched? Anybody notice which one? I used it once.
Yellow?
No. The white. Why do you think that is? What happens when you depend on white? Everything gets pasty, right? And you say, what happened to my color? So I go to white towards the end. That's when my white starts to appear, as I go to light to dark, dark to light. You can see me squinting to try to simplify these shapes. Carry this color right here in the front a little bit. Maybe I do want to represent a little bit of those stems, just to suggest that there's something happening there. I don't know, I hope this is interesting. You know that saying, nothing more boring than watching paint dry. All right, so I feel like I've got some greens. My one last green. So on this one, actually I think I could use this one because we are in the same color family. I'm going to lighten this up. And I am going to use a little white on this one. But this also needs a little bit of red. And again, I can check it. Well, you know, that's pretty close. It's pretty close. Doesn't feel like there's enough paint right there. So now I feel like it's better, more paint. All right. So what would you think my next step would be? What would be the next place to go on this? Anybody? Maybe the purple, yeah. These, especially these dark purples, because I'm working dark to light, dark to light. So now it's time to change this. I already managed to spread out everywhere.
Is that special palette paper?
This is palette paper, yep. You can buy them bigger, but I'll keep this over here as a reference, so I'll say, oh, what was the color that I used? But you can use a regular palette. You can scrape it off every time, but with acrylic, it's almost easier to do this because it dries so fast. Oils you can clean off with a medium, but acrylic you may as well just toss it. It's just so much easier than trying to keep it. And there are also boxes which I can bring. They're palette boxes. You might have seen them. They look like a big Tupperware box. Okay, where's the end of this tape? Who has better eyes than me? Oh, there it is. Oh. Can you? Thank you. The gloves don't help. So the palette boxes, you can actually buy the size palette to fit right in the box. There's a liner underneath that you wet, and then, thank you so much, and then the paints stay moist because, you know, you want to keep, a lot of times you put out a lot of paint and it's time to go and it's such a waste. So those palette boxes, they sell them at Michael's, they sell them, do any of you go to Artisan Craftsman on Route 1? Yeah. Love that store. Jeff is in there, Nia is in there. I send my students there to buy their supplies because they, to me, have professional art supplies. And if they don't have it, they can get it for you. And their paint's a good quality, their brushes are good quality. And most of my brushes come from them. There is a brush that people like called rosemary brushes. They are something you have to send away for, but they're a great brush too. You have to just go online and order them. But primarily I love these, the silver handled ones. They're the titanium. And I guess they're Robert Simmons, but I really like them. You can see I have quite a few of them.
What paint you use? What brand do you like?
Well, these are Goldens and some are Galleria, but when I'm using oils, I use Winsor Newton, some Rembrandt, yeah, Gamblin, because we see Gamblin. Yeah, Gamblin. And the other thing that you'll notice is certain companies make certain colors, and when you try to swap companies, the colors are very different. So you have to decide which ones you like. And a friend of mine, her whole thing was, she said, I buy the more expensive colors in the cheaper paints, and the less expensive paints in the less expensive colors in the more expensive paints. I love Rembrandt paints, but they are out of this world. You know, a tube this big, you know, could be $45. So when you're painting a lot, you go through it. All right, so this beautiful, let's go with, let me do the dark purple first and then go to this beautiful like magenta. So our dark purple, obviously, is going to be starting with our ultramarine blue. Now I can feel already this is getting a little tacky. So it's time to squirt paints. So this is a pretty deep color, but I'm going to use one of these more pinky reds to make this beautiful purple. There it is. Okay. So again, I check it. You know what? I'm not sure if this is still a little too blue. Let's try a little bit of the other red. Mostly a rule of thumb that I've heard is, you know, you can make these incredibly complex colors, but, you know, usually 3 colors mixed together should get you what you're after, okay? If you start adding every single color on your palette, it rapidly turns muddy, and none of us want that. Okay. And the other thing that happens when you're using a palette knife is you don't get caught in that whole thing, that whole muddy thing. You can see every time I put a clean brush into this paint, so I get nice clean color. So these are my little guys right here. One. I'm going to leave the space for the center. 2. And this one's a little more sideways. So they're there. They're okay. And now there's an interesting thing though with these, what are these called? Anybody who does? Liatris, okay. One of my friends is a florist, and she's like, you should know the names of these flowers. Well, I don't. So the Liatris has a dark center, right? So if I just paint this whole thing this light purple, that's really not an accurate representation of the values that are in that step, correct? So I'm going to make, again, a black kind of gray, blackish gray, and see if I can put that under and then put the purple on top. So let me see how dark I want to get this. It's pretty dark. It's pretty dark. So all I'm going to do with it is just run it up here through the center. I'm going to let that just like dry a little bit. And then it's back here, and then it's here. So we'll let that dry. Oh, I just spotted it in a little purple. Does it show? Let's see. Right here. Little tiny flower over the edge. Okay. Now, looking at this green, do you think it looks complete? No. This is kind of thin. You need more paint. And I'll go back in on top of that as I go along. And it depends, you know, if I have enough time tonight, how far I'll get on this. But I'm just trying to block in and put the colors in that I know I need to get that underpainting done.
That's hard to simplify.
Yes, so I'm simplifying all the way along. Go back into that purple.
Or just show it to the camera for a minute.
Show it.
There we go. Awesome.
Okay. All right. So now, let's really get some of this like magenta-y kind of color. But I'll go back to my white at this point. See what I can get. But that's a pretty strong color, so right away, look what happened. That white, I need more color here. Now, I might decide at this point that maybe I want to have more fun with the brush stroke. So I maybe can start to move this brush around a little bit and say, okay, maybe I can get some of this going on. And then over here. So I'm starting to see what I'm looking at. I'm really trying to brush this along so that I can fill it all in. Like, okay, I don't like that. So scraping is a really great tool. And sometimes when you scrape, you say, oh, that's more what I want it to look like when you scrape. And you can see how I'm starting to get some deep differentiation here in these yellows. You know, painting reflections is, again, just looking for simple shapes and saying, where can I lay in darks, where can I lay in lights? I'm going to lay this in. And then you know, there comes a point in your painting also when it's time to clean up the palette and start fresh, all of this. Sometimes that's when it's time to be done. That's the other thing. A lot of times you're like, well, it's time to clean up my palette. I think that's it for the day. It is. It's definitely good to take a break. You can only look at something for so long, and I actually have not done what I usually do, and that's step away. I always tell my students, step away, or what I tell people to do actually, and I don't know if you do this, but I'll do this. I turn right around and walk away. And don't even look at it. And then I turn back and I go, okay, I see what I want to do. I see what's happening. But you have to really stop. You can't back up. You have to turn away from it.
I see what you
know, and really, then you can get a better idea. So with this bottle, I'm just going to lighten that up. And actually even put a little bit of yellow in it for those highlight areas. Use the end of my brush and just put those here and here. So that's all I'm going to do for that right now. And you can go crazy paint glass. So again, this is all about simplification. This isn't about the most beautiful painting that you ever saw. I'm trying to explain to you an approach to take when you're beginning and to keep squinting, to keep evaluating. How can I simplify even more to get a good color? How can I really, really, really paint what I'm seeing, but without every little nuance? Those little nuances are great, but we don't always need them to make that statement. I find the paintings I'm most drawn to, think about a Matisse or a Cézanne. They're not a lot of detail in those paintings, and they're exquisite. Oh, and by the way, never compare yourself to things in a museum, because the reason that they're in a museum is they're 1 in a million. Okay, so just let it go right off the bat. So, anybody ever read a book called Art and Fear? It's really great. It's all essays about making art and how we're so self-critical and what holds us back. And it's just a wonderful bunch of essays to just really help you realize that, you know what, it's okay. What you're doing is fine. It's okay. We're all our own worst enemies, aren't we? Don't we say things to ourselves we'd never say to another human being? That's terrible, that's disgusting, I can't believe you did that, oh my God, I'm putting it in the trash. And if it was your best friend standing there, you'd say, you know, I see some good things about it. You know, I know it's not your favorite, but let's talk about what went right. And that's what's important, to do that with yourself. Don't be so critical, that'll drive you away from your easel. What a wonderful thing that we're able to do, to stand and paint and really lose ourselves in that whole process. A lot of people don't have that, and you know, this is just, you know, I told you about George Nick. He's in his 80s, and he said, "It's the one thing that still interests me." You know, and I thought, that's true though. Think about that. It still captures his imagination. It captures his attention. It's still.
Mary, we had a couple of people ask, are you mixing water in with the acrylic?
Not really, I'm only just rinsing my brush. I don't generally, because it just dilutes it. And if you want to do a wash, that's great, but when you're starting to apply the paint thickly, you don't want that to happen. I'm trying to build up this paint a little bit. I heard somebody saying, oh, it's, you know, something about a little more contemporary or, you know, whatever, and maybe so. There's this whole school of painters called perceptual painters, and they're out of Philadelphia. And if you look at their work, it's beautiful, but it's definitely their own take on their world. And it's not, you know, trompe l'oeil or something like that. It's not photorealism. It's not that at all. If you are interested in that, there is a man called Reddington, Harold Redcliffe. Look him up. It's unbelievable. He paints very, very detailed things with machinery and gears, and it's just amazing. He's one of George Nick's buddies. So.
What's his last name?
Redcliffe. R-E-D-I Cliff, I think. A nice place to go to look at art shows is Concord Art Association. Anybody ever go up there? It's really, they really have some good quality shows up there. And actually, George Nick curated a show there a couple of years ago and brought in some of his favorite painters. And been something that I've looked at. Is obviously, probably all know, Fairfield Porter. Beautiful, beautiful color, simplified shape, really gorgeous work. Ewan Uglow, another one. You guys familiar with Uglow? British painter, look him up. Unbelievable.
What's his first name?
His name is Ewan. His last name is Uglow, U-G-L-O-W. He's an amazing painter, amazing. And so now I might just have a little fun with some of these flowers and do the centers. You know, I'm not like thrilled with what's going on here, but I feel that, you know, for what we're doing here tonight, for what I'm talking about, and you can see if I build up these lighter layers now on top of this yellow, I can start to make some of this, and I still don't have to put in every single petal. I don't have to do that. I can make a stroke this way for a whole section of the flower, right? Right? It's still a flower. Okay? So that's what I'm talking about when I say simplification. You don't have to go, because that's when you go, well, this looks terrible. What did I just do? So that I work a lot like this. This to be a little darker underneath here to denote that there's a shadow going to cast. That can just, like that. As I start to bring out these yellow, I mean, you can start to see the thickness.
Yeah.
It'll get thicker and thicker and thicker. And then you really actually, even on a very small level, you're getting some three-dimensionality in your painting, right? So it's a great thing to do, because I started off real thin. You saw how it was just kind of like this. It's really thin. It's almost a wash. And then as you go along, you start to add more and more.
And what about the slow drying paint? Do you try that?
That's good too, especially if you're painting outside or a warm day, it's going to dry up in a flash. And then, you know, so if you get this, if the medium of the slow drying paint, you have a lot more flexibility. Like this dries practically as soon as I put it on there, right? So I think I want to put the centers in on these, and then I think I'm going to just call it a day, because I don't want to, I would work on this for a lot longer, you know, because now I feel like it's blocked in. So I'll put the centers in just to give me an idea of where everything is. But I would love to go back in here and add more layers and more, you know, some other colors, some other values. But I feel like in this, I've got a dark value, right? I've got a really light value, and I've got these medium values. So that is how the painting starts to come together. And I've broken the edge on a couple of places. I feel like the composition kind of does that rule of thirds. Okay, you're all familiar with that, right? So you never want to put your center of interest right in the middle of the painting. Oh, and look what I have in the center of the painting. It's a bit of gray, very dull and boring, right? So I bring the eye up, I bring the eye over here. It's like kind of almost a triangular thing that's going on here, but I do have this little shoot going off here. So when you're, I tend to, do it automatically, but it really is a good idea to actually make those lines on your piece and see, these are your, if you make the checkerboard, so to speak, these are your areas that you really want to bring your eye around. You know that triangle, the golden triangle, right? So 1, 2, 3. So I've kind of got that going on here, all right? So I'm going to just, as I said, I'm just going to finish up a little bit, put a little more on those, now that I know the name, Beatrice. Put a little more on those because they look a little wishy-washy. And that'll be it for tonight, I think. So fire away if you have any more questions. Anybody else have colors that they like to use or questions about brushes or any of that?
Brushes, can you use oil painting brushes or?
No, that's a good question. When I paint, my brushes are interspersed. Like I'll just wash these out and use them again. The thing is, you've got to really clean your brushes if you use them. Like I have acrylic on here tonight. I have to really clean them because the acrylic, whatever's left, will make them hard as a rock. Whereas when you clean your brushes off with oil, they're oily. So they don't, you have to just be really careful.
Do you use anything special to clean your brushes?
Ivory soap.
Just
Yep, use a little bit of ivory soap. And does anybody do this in the palm of their hand? You take bar of ivory soap, put the brush on it like this, go like this in the palm of your hand until nothing comes out. And then they're clean. And then you take them like this at the end, put them back away like this, and that's how you maintain your brushes. Some people even say leave a little soap in them, but I don't buy special brush cleaner. I've been taught for years. Is anyone go back years ago in Wakefield, by the way? Anyone? Anybody know Nancy Gambone?
Oh, I do.
I've heard of her.
She was my first art teacher when I was a little girl, and she always loved to tell the story that I was the youngest student she ever had. I was 7 years old, and she told my mother I could come, but I had to come. She had to let me come in and see, like, if I could do it, because she set up all she did all around the room was all setups, and there were adults and kids. So I came in. I'll never forget it. The whole room smelled like turpentine. It was just the best smell ever, and I had to draw a still life with bottles and. I'm 7 years old, but I did it, and I started becoming a student. And then years later, when I decided to get back into some painting, because a friend of mine was going by my house, someone that we kind of knew, he pulled over, and I said, "What are you doing here?" He said, "Oh, I'm going to take painting class. Around the corner, I'm going to see Nancy Gambone." I said, "What?" She was literally around the corner from my house teaching in a basement. And so we reconnected, I went back, she and I then taught, I painted with her for a long time, and then I finally, went on to go back to school and everything, and I visited with her, and eventually, she did pass away, but she was quite a big influence for a lot of people, really, and her work was beautiful, just beautiful. She was a lovely, lovely woman, too. Really, really wonderful. But I always laugh when I think about how that happened. I met up with her again much later on in my life. So she was really something. But, you'll have people in your life that come and go, that help you with your painting, and you move on to another teacher, and you don't necessarily stay with the same teacher. I've been with the same teacher for quite a while now, but part of the reason is that she's at Mass Art, and I want to go to a college situation and keep studying, and I really like her approach, and I did study with someone else a little bit, and that was really great because I took what I had learned with Catherine and brought it to this other whole thing, which is what led me to these dress series, and now I'm back and I'm painting the figure. I've painted the figure a lot, so We're not doing that tonight, obviously, but I've done that for 5 years, painting the figure, and I'm currently doing it again and doing life drawing, because the figure is just always a challenge. It's just amazing. But I encourage you to always avail yourself of different teachers, different classes, and they don't all have to be perfect, they don't all have to be the thing, but you'll learn something. And if you don't, if someone makes you feel small, or you're not learning, don't go back. One of the worst experiences of my life was at a painting class that I went to, and the teacher made me feel like terrible, and I packed up my stuff and I went home. And I was very upset, and almost stopped me from painting for quite a while. And then I thought, wait a minute, that's not right. Just because I didn't want to do what he was telling me to do his way doesn't mean that I can't paint. But, you know, it was a bad experience, so don't let anybody do that to you. Don't let anybody make you feel small like that. Because we're all on the same path. We're trying to interpret our world. We're all trying to really do the best we can with our own vision. And, you know, the other thing is, did you guys see that whole thing about the color of that dress last year? It was about this dress that everybody was saying, what color was it really? Okay, wasn't that interesting to think about what color is this dress? We all see color so differently. So who knows what you're looking at and what I'm looking at? Could be two totally different things. You might be looking at it going, I don't see what she's doing. I can't even imagine what she's doing. But we're seeing through our own eyes. And also, we're also seeing with the result of all our experiences too. So we have to really know that it's a personal expression. It's not a fact. You know, art is the most subjective thing that there is. There are certain objective qualities, that when you talk about how to make a color, how to clean your brushes, how to prepare a surface. But other than that, when someone says they like this or they like, you know, people say, I don't know much about art, but I know what I like. You know, and that always makes me laugh because it's really true. We all feel that way. I don't know that much, but I know what I like. I know what resonates with me. It's the same thing. You read a book or you hear a piece of music. You may not know that much about it, but you know what resonates with you. And the other thing is to really get familiar with different artists' work. They can really, really, really influence how you, if you start to really look at some of these artists, you can really see how they go about things. And one of the best exercises you can do is to do a copy. Take a painting and make a copy, because you'll learn so much about mixing color that it will be mind-boggling by the time you're done. It's really a great exercise. So with that, I think I'm done for tonight, because it's almost 9 o'clock. And this is what we got so far. I guess, you know, an hour's worth of blocking in is what we've got so far. And, you know, look at my little, you know, do we have some similar colors here? Because that's the point, the color. They're different too.
So Mary, we've seen you at the Art in Bloom at the Lynnfield Library.
Yeah.
And is there, we've seen you at the Paint Out at the Lake Quantico.
I got the Paint Out at Lake Quantico. I have, my work is in a lot of private collections. I also showed at the Danforth Museum down in Framingham, in the George Nick show, 13 Lessons for 16 Painters. I was at the Beth Ellis Gallery in Ogunquit, and I show in my own studio most of the time.